Episode 12, Winning with Numbers, the Role of Analytics in Sports.
All the data is doing is helping you find advantages and giving you a competitive advantage. And
Yeah.
so I think that it just helps, helps teams win.
Welcome to the Data Nerd Podcast. I'm your host, Nisar Ahmed. Join me as we explore the inner data nerd inside all of us. Dive into the world of data alongside special guests who not only share their wealth of experience and knowledge, but also unveil what truly makes them data nerds. This podcast is brought to you by Business Intelligence. That's BIZNIS Intelligence. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel at Business Intelligence to stay up to date with tablet training and the Data Nerd podcast. Connect with me on LinkedIn or stream the Data Nerd podcast across all major podcast platforms. Welcome to the Data Nerd podcast. I have the pleasure today of welcoming Ben Alamar to our podcast. Ben has been a pioneer in data science and sports analytics for over 20 years, developing advanced analytic tools, building teams for organizations like ESPN, the Oklahoma City Thunder, Cleveland Cavaliers, and StubHub. His work includes creating innovative models for sports business decisions, collaborating with executives to integrate data into decision making, and teaching at institutions like Columbia, MIT, and the University of San Francisco. Alamar has published extensively in sports analytics, contributed to outlets such as ESPN and the Wall Street Journal, and is the founding editor of the Journal of Quantitative Analytics in Sports. He's also the author of Sports Analytics, a guide for coaches, managers, and other decision makers. So welcome to the Data Nerd podcast, Ben.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, pleasure having you on. Sports is a topic near and dear to my heart. My story and on how I became a data nerd started off in sports. Like when I was a child, I used to go over the box scores every day. Baseball plays well into statistics, right? Even historically speaking. And so I always used to, I was a Montreal Expos fan. They're no longer the Expos, but I used to like follow the players, look at the leaders, go through the box scores, but all the sports, hockey, basketball, football, whatever it may be. And that's when I didn't know then, but now I look back, that's when I realized I was a data nerd. Amount of uh amount of interest I had in the data in sports is kind of what gravitated me towards and into sports as well, and that's part of my passion. So that's my story. But I want to ask you, this being the Data Nerd podcast, are you a data nerd? Um, and if so, tell me a story of when you realized you were one.
Oh, I'm definitely a data nerd. There's my kids will tell you that for sure. Um, but I think that you know my own realization of sort of like the importance and the value of sort of comes. I have two uh, moments, and interestingly, they're both after I finished a doctorate in economics. So I worked in data. I was interested in math and all this stuff. I like research and stuff. But when really I was working at University of California, San Francisco, doing research in tobacco control legislation, and there was a lot of, at that time, it was when a lot of areas and municipalities were going, restaurants were smoke free.
Mm.
And the pushback was always from tobacco industry advocates were always, oh, you're killing restaurants, and bars. Bars can't survive if you don't allow smoking. And so my boss and I, we did a study, and we looked at values of restaurants and bars, and we looked, and it was pretty clear that restaurants, it wasn't only that these ordinances didn't hurt restaurants and bars, it actually made them more valuable.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of mechanisms, and when you saw that, it was like that. It's counterintuitive because that the narrative that they was being presented was pretty clear. It seemed logical, but it was, when you look at the data, it's really obvious. Like that's not, it's the exact opposite of of what the story people are telling.
Mm.
So that was really one of the times where I was like, data. I gotta have the always got to bring data. And then from a sports perspective, at about the same time, I started reading a website called Football Outsiders,
Hmm.
and I grew up in Washington D.C., where we had the now Washington Commanders
Yeah.
during while I was growing up, they were a great team. Like Joe Gibbs and was running the team. We had John Riggins, and we were running all over. And running was the way to win football games. And reading the Football Outsiders and some other writers at the time, it's like, no, actually, that's not the case at all. It's completely the opposite. It's
Mhm.
you pass first, and you run a lot, and when you have the lead, and that's how you win games. You get a lot of rushing yards when you win games, but that's the direction is the opposite of the way that people were telling the story. It's just a fundamental different way of looking at the game of football, which
Yeah.
was again sort of eye opening to me, and that's a lot of where my direction in sports analytics came from.
And so in football, it used to be very heavy, run heavy, right? Now it's pass heavy. Uh, and you see less, not less running backs, but the importance of having a running back is not as great as it used to be. I don't know, what was it? Maybe like 20 years ago? Is that kind of when it changed?
Yeah, I mean, about then. So like when and there was work that was done at Football Outsiders as part of this, but one of the early studies that I did, pieces that I published in sports analytics, was looking at what I called the passing premium puzzle.
Mm,
It was that when you look at it fundamentally, passing was gained more on a per play basis in terms of value for the team, without question, than running did. And this was, it was always said, well, passing is riskier. It was a famous refrain. Well, only three things can happen on a pass play, and two of them are bad. And the way it was always presented. Well, it turns out when you look at it really carefully, passing is actually safer, is less risky than running in most situations. There are certain situations where running is safer,
yeah.
but when you really clearly define what risk is and you measure it, like running is riskier in most cases than passing. And so it was at that time, running again was the way, that's how you win ball games, strong
Yeah.
running. And so that work was in line with a lot of other work that was coming out at the time. That no, you got to throw the ball. You got to throw the ball a lot, and that's really shifted the way the game is played.
Yeah, it's shifted the way the game's played in football. And it kind of made me think that does that same type of parallel being drawn in basketball now too? Because now in basketball, right, you have such a um high, much more three pointers now than there were 20 years ago,
It,
right?
it it is dramatic, the change in how in shot choice in the NBA. It's when you look at the curves of how 3-point shots per game has changed since over the last 15-20 years. It is truly mind bending that the game has changed that much. I think, but what's interesting to me about that is, it absolutely, there's been this focus analytics. I mean, it's hard to call that. It's not really that difficult to see. Well, three is more than two. You multiply by the probability of winning. The
Yeah,
expected point is way higher. So like, it's pretty,
yeah,
it's not that complicated. But we have definitely had this massive shift towards this kind of shot, but teams are still trying to invent new and different ways of getting that shot. So it's not like, people complain, well, everybody plays the same way. I just shooting all the threes they can. Like, well, sure. But if you watch the games, these teams do not look the same. They do not play the game the same way. So it's really fun to see this new innovative ways teams try and generate the highest value shots they can.
yeah, yeah. Um, so I grew up watching Jordan, and at that time, there were three pointers, but I mean, Jordan did not shoot the three nearly as much as players shoot them now, right? And so it'd be interesting. Like, what do you think? You think if Jordan played now, his game would translate well to today's game?
I mean, I think his game would be different. I don't think he would play the same way.
Yeah,
I mean, Jordan was like, you know, extraordinary. But I mean,
yeah,
you can't say enough. Like, he could absolutely play extraordinarily well in this era. But I think he probably would be shooting more threes, and like some of those step back jumpers would be from behind the 3-point line instead. Like, you can.
yeah,
He was a good enough shooter to do that. It's just that wasn't the emphasis. Nobody was pushing that. Nobody was trying to do that, take advantage of that. I have no doubt that he could play, at the same level that he played in those days. And in some ways, because the game opens up the lane, is spaced out so much more. His ability to move in the lane, he would be much freer
Oh
now.
yeah.
He'd have the same kind of physical presence that would have to wrestle his way through. And so like that is a huge opportunity for some of his skills.
I mean, you still see players that have a similar type of game to him. Like, so I'm a Toronto Raptors fan. When they won the championship, Kawhi Leonard, I think his game was very similar to Jordan, and he did well, and he still does well in
Yeah,
today's
one
game.
of the best players in the league, easy. I mean, he's fantastic. Obviously, different nuances to the game than Jordan, but certainly, from a perspective of here's a wing player who can move well with the basketball, make great decisions with the basketball, shoot the ball well, and is extraordinary defender. So.
Yeah, yeah. So what what caused all of this change? Is it the analytics? Is it the introduction? I mean, I wouldn't say introduction. I think analytics was always part of sports, but I think there's a greater emphasis on analytics, right?
Yeah, I think that the way it tends to unfold in sports is, there are these fundamental things that can help shift the perspective a little bit, and they take a little bit of time to take hold. And when the people started first talking about the 3-point being more efficient shot, like it wasn't like a switch was flipped and everybody started just shooting the ball more. It took some time to develop, and then you had somebody like Steph Curry, like
Yeah,
that's the grease for that wheel for sure. When he's able to reliably pull up from near half court and hit shots, like that's when everybody's like, oh well, we need to be able to do that. Like that's like it becomes so obvious that that's how you can win basketball games, that people want to try and copy that. It's a very teams. It is rare that teams try and do something that's radically different than other teams. It takes courage to do that. Innovation is challenging, and to for a team like the Houston Rockets, when Daryl Morey was the general manager, he pushed hard for their coaches to play a certain way. He wanted them to shoot threes and in the paint, and that's it. And it took, even he's choosing the coaches, it takes a little bit of time for them to adjust and be comfortable with the fact that that's how you play. And then once they're having success, and then you see, players like Steph and Damian Lillard, like
yeah,
be shoot like crazy, like then, at high volumes, that really helps the rest of the league move in that direction.
yeah. He's really changed the game, right? The way it's played. I don't know if I personally think he's probably changed the game more than somebody like LeBron James, because in order to do what LeBron does, you have to be physically like not everybody is built like LeBron
Yeah.
and can do that, right? Whereas Steph Curry is a very normal looking person that a lot of people can relate to.
Yeah. For sure, and that's why if you go to a middle school basketball game now, like you'll see 3-point warm up lines. Like
Yeah,
it's it really has it has moved. Steph has helped make that a cool thing to do that everybody wants to be able to do. And it's hard to when you start to measure impact on the game. What LeBron has done is just otherworldly. He's in the same level as Jordan in terms of how they've impacted the game.
mm,
Steph is right around there. Like he is, as you say, like he is very relatable, and it's much easier for people to try and copy his game than to try and copy LeBron's game. I mean, it,
yeah,
success copying that game is really hard because it's ridiculously good. But
yeah, yeah. Um, so let's talk about your book, right? So you just came out, or it's coming out soon, right? It's in pre-order.
the second
Um,
edition will be out by the end of this month.
okay, so it's called Sports Analytics, a guide for coaches, managers, and other decision makers. So you want to talk about the book, what it's about, and the contents?
Sure. So the book was born out of a class that I was teaching at University of San Francisco. So they have a master's in sports management program, and I was teaching this class to people who were not coming to the class with deep analytical skills. They wanted to be professionals in sports in a variety of different ways. But because of what was happening in the industry, it was really clear that having a good understanding of analytics and data at a certain level was really important for these folks. How to use data in decision making, how to put together and analyze, data that you see and use it in the right way. All that's challenging. And to manage an analytics organization, like how do you hire and staff up the analytics organization in an organization that's never had one before?
Mm.
It's hard because if you're not an expert to know who is good. And so the book is, again, comes directly out of that class that I developed, and is, I believe, and this is my claim, and nobody's refuted me yet, is that it's the only book on sports analytics that doesn't have a single equation in it, because it is not written for the express purpose of teaching somebody who is a data scientist how to take those data science skills and apply them to sports. It's written for the leaders, the managers, the decision makers, the coaches, who are the business leaders, who need to understand data better so they can be more effective at their jobs, but don't necessarily need to know the ins and outs of how a deep learning model works.
So you're really selling them on this, on the philosophy that they need to take sports analytics into consideration?
I think that it is. I think that's when I was writing the book, the first edition. I think that was very much the case. Like it was fairly new, and people who were forward looking saw and said, "Yeah, we need some of the skill set." I think now it's table stakes. I think the way the data has evolved, both for on field play and on the business side, it is really hard to be successful without a good working knowledge, some comfort level with how data works.
I think the same is true, not just in sports, right? In any industry, any company, any organization you work with, you cannot make decisions without data.
Well, I mean, you can, but it's as you say, it's really
Right.
hard to be consistently good. And because I mean, the data, it's there to give you a competitive advantage. Like it's right there to get you a better perspective. It's not, and what I tell coaches, particularly in some areas where data is sort of a little sparse, like it doesn't mean that you have to do exactly what the data tells you, but you have to understand what the data is telling you and sort of place it in the proper context with all the other types of information that are coming at you.
Yeah. Is there a particular sport that you focus in on in the book?
In the book, you try and do as broad a range of sports as possible. There are examples from the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, track and field, WNBA, again, business side, sports side of things. Because the idea is that this is as supposed to be as broad a look at this and as really broad applications in every sports organization, in every part of every sports organization, and that's really the goal.
But do you have a favorite sport?
So, as I mentioned, growing up, I was all in on football. That was the one thing that I followed the closest.
Mm.
And growing up in Washington, that's all. We had the Bullets at the time; they were terrible. We
Yeah.
had the Capitals, who had some moments, but we didn't have baseball. We had a great football team. So, when I really first started in the sports analytics world, I thought I was absolutely going to focus in football entirely. And I certainly did some work there, but I ended up, through opportunities, I ended up diverting directly into spending a lot of time in the NBA and working, for NBA teams, and then working as new data was coming into the NBA, helping ESPN understand how to use that and better in broadcast. And so at this point, I'm NBA first at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. And so you worked for Oklahoma City Thunder, one of the teams that you worked for. I think we talked before, you were a part of the team when they went to the finals, right? Kevin Durant, James Harden, Westbrook.
Yep. Yep.
How
We
was
were
that experience?
Oh, it was amazing. One of my favorite moments in my professional career is standing at we won game one of that final series against Miami, and then I went to I was a consultant, so I flew in I was living in San Francisco, flew in to Oklahoma City for game two, and we got to the arena an hour and a half or so before the game, and I'm standing out on the balcony of the luxury box, looking at the arena, the empty arena, as they're putting T-shirts on every seat, and
Yeah.
I can't believe I who got cut from my eighth grade basketball team is here part of a potential NBA championship team. Like that was just truly inspiring to me. And then ref didn't call a foul on LeBron, so we lose game 2, and then Shane Battier becomes the greatest 3-point shooter in the history of the world for the rest of the series, and we get blown out. But it was an amazing experience that I really was really fortunate to be a part of a great organization in that run.
Do you become a fan of that team after you work for them? So now that you don't work for them anymore, are you still rooting for Oklahoma City Thunder? Because they're doing well. And
Yes.
I mean, as of today, May 17th, they are down 3-2. But they have a very good team. I think they'll be good for some time.
Oh, and they're an incredibly young team. Like Shea Gilgeous-Alexander's
Yeah.
25, and he is a dominant player already. So yeah,
He's
they're in great shape.
he's a Canadian, so
Oh, there you
I'm
go.
born and raised in Canada, so I'm a fan of his.
Yeah. So I mean, yes. So it's funny you mentioned, like, I definitely was have a very warm place in my heart for the Thunder,
Mm.
and the fans in Oklahoma City. Like when we during that game too, where we got down very badly, at certain points, and the entire fan base is incredibly engaged, on their feet, shouting, yelling the entire time. We come back and we end up losing again. Ref should have made a call, but I'm really not bitter about that. They just the fan base is amazing. So I really think that it's amazing, and Sam Presti has done a great job with that organization. So I'm a big fan of what they do.
Yeah, yeah. Do you so when you start I know you said you were a fan of football, the Washington now Commanders, right? When you're working in sports analytics, right? Do you have to kind of hold your bias when like how much bias can you have when you're working in sports analytics?
Well, so that's a really great question, because it gets to the heart of what your job is as the sports analytics, the data guy in the room.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think that one of the things that I learned, in part the hard way, is that your job is to speak for the data, tell the story that the data is telling,
Mm.
and tell exactly the story the data is telling. You can't embellish, you can't, hold back, you can't hide things, you don't want to cherry pick things, because at the end of the day, you can be, your bias is a bias, and it's going to be wrong, and at some point, and you don't want to be in the place where you have to explain why this, that your data was wrong, because you didn't present it honestly.
Yeah.
Everybody else in the room, scouts and all of them, they can speak in hyperbole, they can do all that, and they're not held to the same level of scrutiny as the data guy. They just never will be, because we put, the data is clear, and exactly what we're saying is very clear and recorded, unlike everything else. And so people will revisit and ask you, well, why were you wrong about this? And you better understand it, and it better not be because you were unfair to the data in some way.
And you're seeing people who are in data analytics get into positions now where they're managing teams. They're general managers of teams as well, right? And so I think the importance of knowing the data, it helps tremendously in if you want to make a career in sports.
Exactly. And I think that what you've seen in the major sports every time, and this what was referred to as player tracking data, where through various different technologies, you can track the location of a player 250 times a second. And that data is sort of what always causes an explosion in the sport in terms of analytics, because it's really, really complex. Play-by-play data is, you can play with Excel and get almost all the value out of it that you can.
Yeah.
The player tracking data is coordinates that are millions of data rows for every game, and it's impossible to get any value out of it without a really good data scientist. And so the folks that really can understand that and capture that and get the value out of that data early are the ones who will succeed, and that's going to elevate you through the ranks quickly. And I think helping understand that the power of that kind of data and being able to mine into it is it's the huge competitive advantage when you can do that ahead of everybody else.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, you and I are both data people, right? And so we're in agreement here. But there are critics out there, okay? And there are people, sometimes I listen to sports talk show hosts who may have not grown up with the analytics, and now they're seeing that um, teams are making decisions based on analytics, and they're claiming that it ruins the sport, right? And they should just let the coaches or the managers trust their own judgment. What do you say to people like that?
So within any given sport, and I think baseball is where this gets
Yes.
analytics from a term hurting the sport gets the most problem.
Mm.
Like all the analytics is helping you optimize within the current rule set. If you don't like the way the game looks, if then change the rules. It's okay. You can change the rules. You can experiment, do different things. I think hockey is is a sport that's really really good at this. They don't like the way something works, they change it. Even mid playoff series, they'll change a rule. And but other sports are really hesitant to change things that they view as fundamental. That all analytics is helping you find the value within the current rule set. So if you don't in basketball and football, in football in particular, I think it's caused us to be more aggressive, and caused ask people to do things that are more spectacular to see, and so actually really heighten the excitement of the game for most fans. There's some folks who really just want to see 3 yards in a cloud of dust, and like, well, I'm sorry. Again, if you think that's what all fans want, great. Go change the rules so passing isn't as valuable, or defensive backs can hold people. Like that's fine. You can do that, but um, I think Kirk Goldsberry recently has a book out, and he talks a little bit about the 3-point line in the NBA. And
Mm.
the corner three is this highly valuable thing because it's a shorter shot than all of the three shots. And so we should extend the 3-point line to limit some of the behaviors of people just sitting in that corner waiting for the shot, not being engaged as much in the offense, but just waiting for their opportunity to take advantage of this anomaly on the court. And that's fine. Like that's true. Like if you don't like the way the game looks, change the rules. All the data is doing is helping you find advantages and giving you a competitive advantage. And
Yeah.
so I think that it just helps helps teams win, and that's sort of at the core what I'm trying to
At the end of the day, that's what everyone's, right?
yeah.
And even if you're a coach or a manager, you have to now listen to the data or listen to the people who are doing the analysis, right? Um, do you, from your experience, and you've worked with, I mean, you've worked directly with coaches, right? Do you think they're willing to listen, or do you think that, sometimes there's some I don't know, what's the word? Backlash, or they're saying, no, I know what I'm talking about. I have the experience.
Yeah, and I think that I think that when you take a coach or a general manager, like this is somebody who's been extraordinarily successful in their sport. They clearly know a ton about it. And when I started working in the NBA, like there's no doubt in my mind that everybody at the table knew way, way more basketball than I did. I really didn't know the sport nearly as well as they did, not even close. And so what you have to do is think about what can you do that's actually valuable that will help them see something that's different. There's some people you'll never get to, like that are just going to tune you out no matter what. I was fortunate that most of the time that was not the case, but it wasn't necessarily that everybody embraced me right away, but people weren't openly rude. I didn't have those Moneyball rude moments.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I did. There was one guy that I worked with on one team who was a really old school guy, and very friendly. We chatted, but like when it came to engaging with the work that I was doing for the team, he was not interested.
Hmm.
And so for the first year, there was nothing like all the time I had with him, like between breaks and meetings and such around the practice facility, like it was just chatting, getting to know him, talking basketball here or there, getting him to a place where he could understand that I was bringing a perspective, and that I wasn't trying to take anybody's job. I was just trying to help. I had the same goal that he did. Let's help this team win more games. Like that's really what we both wanted to do. And then it was a great moment we had in one of our draft meetings where we were going around talking about one position group, and he ranks his players in the position group, and it's my turn, and I walk through sort of why what my rankings are, why I think they are the way they are, and the strengths and weaknesses of these players. And we're about to go to the next person, and this guy says, "Oh, wait, I need to change my rankings. Ben's right." And it was like, oh, like that was the moment where he's like he was
Yeah.
finally open to hear like what I was saying. I mean, maybe I got much better over the last year, but no, I think most of it was he was able to trust me and my motivations. And I think for the most part, that's what you need is you need people to understand where you're coming from. That you want to is the same as them, just winning basketball games, just a different skill set that you're bringing.
As you were explaining that, I was thinking about, I know I have not worked in sports analytics, professionally speaking, but it's the same story in corporate America.
100%.
I have stakeholders or business users who don't want to listen to what I have to say because they think they know better, right? What is my job? My job is to take the data and translate that to them and provide the insights. At the end of the day, they're still making the decisions, right? You're just giving them the tools to do that, and hopefully they listen and are able to make data-informed decisions. But whether it's in sports or corporate America, I think the challenges are the same or similar.
I think that's exactly right. I think that it's and the way I present it a lot for decision makers is the data is you know it's going to help you reduce the uncertainty around the decision making. So like you may have this much uncertainty, and after really careful analysis, we might have this much uncertainty. It's a risky decision, no matter how like drafting a player in the NBA, really risky decision. Launching a new product, risky decision. It's the same kind of thing, but it's obviously different context, but yeah, no, same kinds of struggles, same kind of biases where confirmation biases and all this kind of stuff that people you run into. But yeah, people are the same. Decision makers are the
Yeah,
same. Leaders are the same.
yeah,
Um, different areas.
yeah, exactly. Um, so what about AI? How is that change? I mean, that's the talk now, right? That's kind of the what's hot. How is that going to change sports analytics and how sports is run?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Like it's a new technology that's going to help us learn, more and do things more efficiently with data. So it's for sure. And I mean, no, it's not like we've solved basketball. Like, so more and better and deeper analysis can only help us learn more. And um, so tools like AI, like, now we can, feed in, 20 years of scouting reports and
Mhm.
use along with college data and use that to help much better inform our draft decision making. Yeah, that
Yeah,
that we can do that now, and that's something we couldn't do, without some really in any real way, 5 years ago. And so just the new LLM models are just a huge step forward from that perspective alone. But for sure, in every aspect of how you think about it, like what the best technology applications are, we don't know. We're still experimenting. We're still learning. It's new technologies, but there's no way it's not going to have a significant impact on how we do things.
yeah. I mean, I think it's going to have an impact. I think the impact from the standpoint that it will make it's another tool that will help us
Yeah.
do our job better, right? I don't think it's going to necessarily replace anything. And I think a fear a lot of people have is, oh, AI is going to replace a lot of people's job. I don't know. I mean, people said the same thing when the internet came out, right? But what happened? I think there's more jobs created than
Well,
taken
that's
away.
the thing. Jobs, there will be some jobs that are eliminated. There's no, like, you think about, the major invention, any brand new technology, the personal computer,
Yeah,
that, massive amounts of jobs for secretaries disappeared nearly overnight with the personal computer. Um, but it's not like unemployment has skyrocketed because of that.
yeah,
No, we've redeployed, and we have a whole lot of new jobs that didn't exist before. We don't know what the jobs are going to be that AI is going to unlock, but it's going to be something. Like no technology has that has eliminated some jobs hasn't paid off in huge new sets of jobs in other areas. Historically, it just hasn't been the case.
yeah. So, while we're on the topic of jobs, right? What if we have listeners or people who want to get into sports analytics? What advice do you have for them? Like what skills should they be gaining or showing off or try to attain to get into sports analytics? Or do you have some advice on how to make your way into the sports industry as a data analyst?
Yeah, I mean, so one, I would say one of the great things about the sports analytics community, I think, is that it is one of the rare corners of the social media world that is actually really good. It's really positive world. So if you want to be involved, closely in the nitty gritty of sports analytics, you know, do work, ask questions, and on Twitter, people will get engaged if they think that you're asking real questions. I think that from a skill set, like the most important thing, and I mentioned player tracking data, like this is really complex, complicated data. There are some samples of it that are floating for different sports floating around the internet now, and spending some time with that data and demonstrating that you can get value out of that is that's the key. I know there are people who are hiring for, trying to hire analysts for NFL teams right now that can't find the people that they want, that because the people they're interviewing don't have the skill set to demonstrate they can handle this data. And so that's a huge opportunity area because the NFL is still fairly new in the NFL. Teams are starting to really hire more and more folks. The NFL runs a big data bowl every year, which is if you want to get
Yeah.
involved in, like, that's a great way to do it because you get to play with the data in an interesting way, and a bunch of NFL teams are going to see your work. And there have been a lot of folks that have been hired out of the big data bowl.
Talk about that. It's a competition for data people, right?
It's an annual hackathon. They give out a data set. They give a prompt, and you try and do what you can with the data. And there have been some really talented folks that are, again, now in NFL front offices because they had never worked in sports before, but they were able to demonstrate they have the skill set to and the enough football intuition to apply to that with that skill set to lead them into some really fruitful areas. And so that's that. And then I would also say, like, take some time to practice how you talk about the data so you can engage with those coaches and general managers who may not be all that informed. And you want to be able to explain it without showing people how to an R squared or output from R. Like you want to be able to talk the language of the sport, not the language of data science when you talk to these folks.
So,
And
so you have to be somewhat of a sports fan to work in data analytics in sports then?
Well, I mean, for one, there's what we call the sports discount. So you're going to make less money. So if you don't love the sport, you probably don't want to work for it.
Right.
Just so that you
Right.
can do better. Um, but yeah, if you do not have any, a knowledge base for the sport, it's really hard to do something that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because there are people who have been doing interesting work for many years. And so if one of the things that I always when people, students are asking that they want to get into basketball analytics, and there's the sort of the founding document, if you will, of basketball analytics is a book called Basketball on Paper by Dean Oliver. And if they haven't read that, then that's an indication to me that they aren't really taking it seriously because they haven't tried to look and see
Mm.
what's happened before and what is going on. It sounds cool to them, and that's about it. And so, so I would, tell people who want to get in, read as much of the work in the sport you're interested in, because there's a lot,
Yeah.
and go find out what people have looked at, how they've approached it. There are a ton of free resources now on the internet to get involved. Highsport.org is a great place to take a look. I mean, StatsBomb has, if you're interested in soccer, offers free tutorials for R and Python to use their data, which is amazing. So there are amazing resources to get out there to get started. But if you're interested, go get started. Start reading, start doing, and start sharing.
Yeah. And I'm in the Tableau space, right? So business intelligence, data visualization, and you see portfolios out there and people working with on sports data. They're beautiful, and I think that's also a great way to kind of showcase your talents in sports. Even if it's just like I'm a hockey fan. I obviously growing up in Canada, I kind of have to be, but I put up a dashboard out there on Tableau Public on who's the best goal scorer of all time. Most people would say Wayne Gretzky. I looked at it from a different perspective. I said, okay, it depends on the era that you played in. if there were more goals than normal, if or less goals. There were different variables, equipment, a goalie skill, whatnot. I took that all into account, put a level even playing field, and then saw after that who was the best goal scorer. And so it was interesting because I I mean, I did it because I love the sport and it's a hobby and it's just something that I like to do and people like to talk about. And it always spawns or spurs on great conversations from people. And people will oftentimes say, no, this is not true. I disagree. But at the end of the day, I'm not giving any personal opinion. This is what the data is showing.
They through and something like that. It's just here's why. Like that, you can disagree, but here's why I believe this to be true. This is what the
Yeah.
data is telling me that's true. Is what the lens I'm using, and then you can argue based on any assumptions and all that you make. But like, yeah, people love to engage in those kinds of discussions. The list, the history, who's the
Yeah.
greatest of all time. That's always good stuff.
Yeah. So years ago, so started working in Tableau 8 years ago. Very early on in my Tableau experience, I wanted to get into sports analytics, and there was a job um, with the NBA,
Yeah.
okay, where the job I had interviewed with them was a Tableau position. My job, or the job that they would be interviewing for, would be to produce real-time visualizations for social media while the games are going on. So I'd be sitting in the room in Secaucus, right, where I have all the TVs on, all the games, watching the games, and then creating data visualizations for social media. And I thought, this is great. This is, I could get paid to watch sports. This is amazing. So I went for the interview, and to my surprise, it was not the technical questions that got me.
Okay.
It was the sports, and maybe this is just the NBA, but they really wanted somebody who knew the NBA inside and out.
Yeah.
Like, uh, I underestimated. I thought I knew the NBA. I walked out of there and I said, "Oh, I don't think I know the NBA."
Yeah.
And so there were a couple of questions they asked me. You being part of having the experience
Mhm.
and working in the NBA,
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you these questions, and you tell me, were they too tough on me, or do
Okay.
you think these are like fair questions? Okay.
All right. Go.
Again, this was 7 years ago or 8 years ago, right? They asked me, what's the starting lineup of the Sacramento Kings? I couldn't do it. I mean I knew basketball, but I didn't know the starting lineup of a team I didn't
Yeah.
follow that closely. Was that a tough question?
Yeah, I mean, but so here, I think so. A great perspective on that. When I was at ESPN, my sports analytics team was in a larger group called the Stats and Information Group, and they had a question. If you wanted to be a researcher for them, like you had to know some stuff. You couldn't, you weren't coming in to learn a bunch of sports. You had to have some really deep knowledge, and there's a test, and if you didn't pass this test,
Hmm.
you weren't getting through the interview. And the questions are not easy, and something like that, like what they're really trying to parse out is, are you that crazy that you who don't follow the Kings, but would know the NBA well enough to know that, like that.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, there's nothing functional about that piece of knowledge that will inform the job, but it's a
Do you know the answer to that?
oh, no way. No, I can't really tell you like starting lineups. I mean, I was very fortunate, I think, in that when I started working in the NBA, Sam Presti was I was the first regular job he hired
Hmm.
me for. We were in Seattle at the time, but like he understood very clearly he was not hiring me for my basketball knowledge, my NBA knowledge. He was hiring me for something else. He was hiring me for my ability to work with data carefully and help inform decision making. And so I got to do a lot of learning on the job about basketball that I really didn't know, just by sitting in the rooms and listening to people talk. And it was great.
Yeah.
It was incredible education. But yeah, no, I would have failed that test for sure.
It makes me feel a little bit better. I always think back to that time. I'm almost like, oh, I wish I was more prepared for it, but I don't think I could have prepared for a question like that.
No,
That's, it's impossible.
that's exactly what they're looking for. For content creators, actual content creators need to have like be so crazy about the sport that they're creating for that they
Yeah,
can tell you things that nobody else can tell you. Um, yeah, no,
yeah.
it's tough place to get into for those that kind of role for sure.
The other question they asked me was, if I were to create a new metric in basketball,
Uh,
what would it be? I have to give it some thought. I forget what it was, but I thought that was a good question, right? It kind of probes into your mindset and how creative you are in looking at the data, right?
Absolutely, and there's all kinds of pieces of information that we don't have great metrics for yet. And
Mm.
some of that's because of the data, some of that's because we haven't gotten there. But yeah, no, absolutely, want to get to somebody who's can be creative and thoughtful about data in a new way.
Yeah. So before we end off, do you want to share maybe like a memorable success story where where you use data analytics to make a significant impact?
Yeah, I mean there are several that are really fun, but I think one of the ones that I think is really I don't share a lot, but I think was really interesting, and I wish I could say we had a huge long term impact. Definitely had a short term impact.
Hmm.
Uh, when I was with Cleveland, we had Dion Waiters, and
Hmm.
Dion Dion was somebody who we thought had the potential to be a really effective scorer in the league, and we could see that he was he was not as aggressive to the rim as we wanted him to be. And this was some of it was data insight, some of it was the coaches knew this, like they just want him to be more aggressive going to the rim, and so we worked with I worked really closely with the coaches to create a data visualization that really demonstrated that what the point we're trying to make. That here's this data that shows like Dion, you see yourself as an all-star, like you want to be an all-star, like that's from a reputation standpoint, from a money standpoint, that's where you want to be. When you go to the rim like this, you score at the level of an all-star.
Hmm.
When you are passive, when you play passively, you don't, and you will never make it to that level. And it was really clear, like here's the motivation. Everything you want to be is by doing this. And the coaches shared and walked him through it. And for the next I think 10 games, he was on fire and he was aggressive to the rim. All this, it didn't last, unfortunately, but it was clear, like for a short period of time, Dion was really, following what the data analytics had said he should be doing. And it was great.
So what happened after that? Did he stop? Was he not was he only aggressive for a short period of time and
Yeah,
then he
yeah,
stopped?
he really fell off. It didn't. It wasn't. The messaging wasn't consistent enough. Wasn't like the rewards weren't as obvious to him right away. The feedback, like he didn't get. I think sort of the feedback mechanism for him wasn't quite right, and he didn't. Sort of the initial drive to do it sort of faded away. And I think we started preparing for the draft, so I wasn't able to do anything more with the coaches at that time. So, but lots of things happen.
It's great because you can see the results of your analytics, like wins and losses, points. Like you say, here's my analysis, and then if they listen to me and they try it, let's see what the result is, right? Um, it doesn't always work though, right? There are like you can't succeed all the time. There are times where you will fail,
Absolutely.
and so it's not bulletproof.
Oh, of course not. Like, no, it is, again, like we talked about, you're taking a risky decision and narrowing the risk. It is a probability. These are probabilities. When you're choosing players, going for it on fourth down, these are probabilities. These are not
Yeah.
certainty. And so you just need a lot of them to know that to be successful over time. Not if you focus on one point in time, one decision, who knows?
Yeah. No, great. I love this conversation. We could probably talk for another hour, but we're gonna wrap it up here. But do you want to I'll put a link up to your book.
Right.
Um and And can people connect with you any other way as well? LinkedIn?
Yeah, definitely. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm happy to chat with people who are interested in sports analytics. It's one of my favorite things to talk about.
And your book can be bought where? What's the best way
Right,
to?
right now, you can pre-order through the Columbia University Press site, and then it'll be up on Amazon by the end of the month.
Great. Awesome. So end of the month, and by end of May.
Yep.
Great. Awesome. No, this was great, Ben. Great conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed this one. Sports is still a passion for me. So always love talking sports and I love data as well. And so I think, I mean, you're in this as for the same reasons, I would assume.
Oh, absolutely. It's really it, it makes it fun to go to work every day when you're competing for things.
Yeah. You have to love what you do. Yeah, and it won't be work anymore, right?
That's the goal.
That's the goal. That's the goal. Great. No, thank you so much for joining the Data Nerd podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.